Imagine a man who made $1 billion in a single day by betting against an entire nation's currency, only to spend the rest of his life and fortune trying to dismantle the very capitalist systems that made him rich. He is simultaneously hailed as a champion of global democracy and demonized as a shadowy puppet master orchestrating world events from the shadows. This is the mind-bending reality of a man whose financial genius and philosophical crusades have fundamentally shaped the modern geopolitical landscape. His journey from a terrified child hiding from the horrors of the Holocaust to the most controversial and influential billionaire philanthropist in history is a profound exploration of power, perception, and the relentless pursuit of an ideal world. To understand his legacy is to understand the hidden mechanics of global finance and the fierce, often bitter cultural battles that define our current era. The origins of this extraordinary and deeply polarizing figure began in the autumn of 1930 in Budapest, Hungary. Born Georgy Schwartz into a middle-class Jewish family, his early childhood was abruptly shattered by the rise of fascism and the devastating outbreak of the Second World War. His father, Tivadar, a lawyer and a man of immense resourcefulness, recognized the impending danger long before the rest of society. He understood that in a world descending into madness, the only way to survive was to outsmart the system and manipulate the perceptions of those in power. He forged identity documents for his entire family and secured hiding places, teaching his young son that reality was not a fixed objective truth, but a malleable construct that could be bent by those with the right knowledge and courage. This profound psychological lesson, learned in the crucible of mortal danger, would become the absolute foundation of his future financial and philosophical worldview. Surviving the Nazi occupation of Hungary was only the first chapter of his incredible resilience. Following the end of the war, the political landscape shifted once again, as the Soviet Union imposed a harsh communist regime over Hungary. Recognizing that the stifling, authoritarian environment would crush his intellectual and personal freedom, he made the difficult decision to leave his homeland in 1947. He arrived in London, a city still recovering from the devastation of the Blitz, with very little money and no knowledge of the English language. He took on menial jobs, working as a railway porter and a waiter in a seaside resort, just to survive and fund his education. Despite the immense hardships, his brilliant mind and insatiable curiosity led him to the London School of Economics, where he would encounter the intellectual framework that would guide the rest of his life. At the university, he fell under the profound intellectual influence of the philosopher Karl Popper, whose seminal work on the dangers of totalitarianism and the defense of democratic values deeply resonated with the young survivor. Popper's concept of the open society, a system where the government is responsive and tolerant and where political mechanisms are transparent, became the guiding moral compass for the young student. However, it was Popper's epistemological theories regarding the inherent fallibility of human understanding that truly captured his imagination. He began to develop the idea that our understanding of the world is inherently flawed and that our imperfect knowledge directly influences the events we are trying to understand. This philosophical realization would eventually evolve into his groundbreaking financial theory, bridging the gap between abstract philosophy and the ruthless reality of global stock markets. After graduating, he moved to the United States and began his career on Wall Street, initially working as an arbitrageur for a small brokerage firm. It was here that he began to formalize his theory of reflexivity, a concept that completely challenged the prevailing economic dogma of the time. The mainstream financial establishment believed in the efficient market hypothesis, which argued that asset prices always reflect all available information, and that markets are inherently rational. He vehemently disagreed, arguing that market participants are always acting with a biased or flawed view of reality. These biased actions influence market prices, and those altered prices, in turn, change the underlying economic fundamentals, creating a continuous, self-reinforcing feedback loop. He realized that this reflexivity is what creates the massive boom and bust cycles in the global economy, and more importantly, it creates the massive inefficiencies that a brilliant, observant investor could exploit for immense profit. This profound understanding of market psychology and macroeconomic trends led to the creation of the quantum fund in the early 1970s, a hedge fund that would become one of the most successful and lucrative investment vehicles in history. Operating alongside his brilliant partner Jim Rogers, he shifted his focus away from analyzing individual company balance sheets and instead looked at the grand, sweeping macroeconomic forces that moved entire nations. He bet on currencies, interest rates, and commodity prices, leveraging his capital aggressively to capitalize on the flawed policies of central banks and governments. The fund generated astronomical returns, year after year, transforming him from a successful trader into a billionaire and cementing his reputation as a financial visionary who could see the hidden fault lines in the global economic system before anyone else. The defining moment of his financial career, the event that permanently etched his name into the annals of economic history, occurred on Black Wednesday in September 1992. The British government was desperately trying to keep the value of the pound sterling artificially high within the European exchange rate mechanism, a move that was severely damaging the UK economy and causing massive unemployment. He recognized that the British economic fundamentals could not support the artificially inflated currency, and that the government's intervention was ultimately unsustainable. He executed a massive, highly coordinated short sell of the British pound, borrowing billions and selling it, betting heavily that the currency would collapse. The Bank of England spent billions of its foreign reserves trying to buy back the pound and defend the peg, but the sheer volume of his selling, combined with the market's realization of the government's weakness, overwhelmed them. The UK was forced to withdraw from the mechanism, the pound plummeted, and he walked away with a personal profit of roughly $1 billion in a single day, earning the permanent moniker of the man who broke the Bank of England. While his financial triumphs brought him immense wealth and admiration in the business world, they also began to attract intense scrutiny and severe backlash from governments and populations who felt the destructive impact of his trades. This tension reached a boiling point during the Asian financial crisis in 1997, when the currencies and stock markets of several Southeast Asian nations collapsed in a rapid, devastating spiral. Political leaders in the region, most notably the Prime Minister of Malaysia, publicly blamed him and other global speculators for deliberately engineering the crisis to plunder their national wealth. Although he maintained that he was merely reacting to and profiting from the fundamental weaknesses in those economies, the accusation stuck in the public consciousness. He was no longer just a brilliant investor to many in the developing world, he became the terrifying face of unregulated, predatory global capitalism, a shadowy figure who could bring sovereign nations to their knees with the stroke of a pen. This intense global criticism, combined with the immense power he wielded over global financial markets, triggered a profound internal and philosophical shift. He began to realize that the very capitalist system that had made him incredibly wealthy was inherently flawed, prone to devastating crises, and capable of generating massive inequalities that threatened the stability of the open societies he so deeply valued. He decided that he could not simply be a passive observer or a mere beneficiary of this system. He had to use his vast resources to actively correct its failures and protect the vulnerable. This realization marked the beginning of his monumental transition from a ruthless financial speculator to one of the most ambitious and influential philanthropists in human history, leading to the creation of the Open Society Foundations. His approach to philanthropy was as radical and unconventional as his approach to finance. Unlike traditional billionaires, who hoard their wealth in endowments to give away after their deaths, he believed in giving his money away while he was still alive, actively managing the strategic deployment of his capital to achieve maximum social and political impact. He poured billions of dollars into promoting human rights, supporting democratic institutions, funding independent journalism, and advancing education across the globe. His foundations played a crucial role in the transition of Eastern European countries from communist dictatorships to democratic states following the collapse of the Soviet Union, providing vital financial support to civil society groups, universities, and independent thinkers who were building the infrastructure of a free society from the ground up. However, his massive financial intervention into the political and social fabric of nations inevitably made him a highly controversial figure, particularly in the realm of domestic politics. As his foundations began to heavily fund progressive, liberal, and left-leaning causes in the United States and Europe, he became the ultimate target for conservative and right-wing populist movements. He was accused of using his vast wealth to interfere in sovereign elections, push radical social agendas, and undermine national identities. The political polarization surrounding his name reached unprecedented levels, transforming him from a complex historical figure into a central villain in the modern culture wars. Politicians who opposed his worldview routinely used his name as a rhetorical weapon to rally their base, painting him as the mastermind behind every progressive social change they opposed. The hostility directed toward him often crossed the line into dark, deeply troubling territory, frequently reviving ancient and dangerous anti-Semitic tropes. In countries like Hungary, his own birthplace, the populist government launched massive, state-funded billboard campaigns specifically designed to demonize him, portraying him as a foreign infiltrator trying to destroy the nation's Christian heritage. These campaigns were so severe and threatening that he was eventually forced to relocate his primary philanthropic operations out of the country. Despite the intense personal attacks, the relentless media scrutiny, and the constant threats to his safety, he never retreated from his mission. He viewed the fierce backlash not as a reason to stop, but as absolute proof that his work was effective, arguing that those who attack him the most fiercely are the very authoritarians his foundations are designed to oppose. The legacy of this extraordinary man is a profound study in paradoxes and contradictions. He is a ruthless capitalist who made his fortune exploiting the inefficiencies of the free market, yet he has dedicated his life and his billions to trying to fix the very inequalities and instabilities that capitalism creates. He is a man who understands the dark, selfish, and biased nature of human psychology better than almost anyone else, yet he remains a steadfast, almost naive optimist about humanity's ability to build a more just, open, and rational society. He has been called a genius and a monster, a savior of democracy and a destroyer of nations, often by the very same people depending on the political context of the day. Ultimately, his life is a testament to the immense, almost terrifying power of ideas and the profound responsibility that comes with unimaginable wealth. He took the harsh, unforgiving lessons he learned as a child hiding from the Nazis and transformed them into a philosophical framework that conquered Wall Street. He then took the billions he earned from that conquest and weaponized them in a lifelong crusade to defend the open society against the forces of authoritarianism, ignorance, and intolerance. Whether one views him as a visionary philanthropist or a dangerous political meddler, his impact on the modern world is undeniable and permanent. He saw the hidden matrix of global finance and used it to build an empire, only to spend the rest of his life trying to ensure that the world that empire inhabits is a little bit more just, a little bit more free, and a little bit more open than the one he was born into.